Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our panelists. U.S. Senator from Missouri, United States Senate, Claire McCaskill. Founder and CEO, Growing Power, Will Allen. Empowerment President and Founder, Empowerment Through Integration, Sarah Minkara. Editor, The Daily Yonder, author, The Big Sort. Moderator, editor, The Daily Yonder, author, The Big Sort, Bill Bishop.
All righty. This session is about something that Americans increasingly avoid, and that is spending or any time or even living with those who are different from themselves. For the past 40 years, we've been busy building a society where we congregate with people like ourselves. I'm not talking about how we look. What we're doing is holing up in neighborhoods and community groups and churches with people who live alike and think alike and every 4 years vote alike. I mean, the most segregated time in the United States is, politically anyway, is Sunday morning. So the goal today is to learn how to find and make common cause with unlikely allies. But I think the first question is, why bother? People are voting with their feet. They're going to the places where they can be around others who are like themselves. So in North Dakota, you can vote to ban most abortions. In Colorado, you can vote to smoke weed. In some states, you protect your children by giving out guns, and in other states, you protect children by taking guns away. So why should we spend time trying to make alliances with those who disagree with us? That's a pain, and as often as not, it doesn't work. So I want to ask each of our panelists this question, but I'll start with Senator McCaskill, who's in the middle of the fray. Why should we bother looking for unlikely allies?
Well, first, I think someone clearly missed something when I was invited to serve on this panel, because the purpose of this panel is to figure out how we can work together, and I serve in Congress. So I'm not really sure how I got here, since obviously we're not doing very well at that. You know, I was thinking as I was waiting backstage, what a great example the founder of this organization set by bringing Pete Peterson out here. I would tell you, I think most people, if I walked up to him and said, you know, hey, President Clinton is doing a deal in front of a bunch of college students, and he's going to spend time talking about the debt. Well, that would be kind of counterintuitive, because you would assume that we're here to talk about eradicating poverty, bringing entrepreneurship to scale, doing away with the great income divide, all of the things that many of you are working your hearts out at. But here he brought someone to talk about a subject that probably a lot of people wouldn't assume would be part of this discussion, and that is our debt. That's the kind of leader he always was. He always tried to figure out a way to find the person on the other side of an issue where he could find some agreement. And in our government, in this grand and glorious and messy democracy, it is incredibly important that you do what may seem to be counterintuitive. And it's important for all of you, if you're going to succeed, to find someone that at first glance you would say, I can't agree with them on anything, because you never know. They may be Pete Peterson, and you may be Bill Clinton, and you might agree about the debt.
Sarah, have you found this to be an advantage in your work?
Actually, yes. So in my work, I think we are facing kind of the mindset issue. So we work with Lebanon, and we're trying to integrate the marginalized disabled population. And the problem is when you come up to the government officials and we want to tell them that, let's work on policies to integrate them, they come back and then say, well, it's not our priority. Yes, the disabled population might be a small subpopulation, but the mindset itself is going to affect other populations. And when you want to come to them and approach them from another perspective and talk to them, well, yes, in the short run, this might be a cost to you, but in the long run, X, Y, and Z. If you approach them from a different angle, it does help out a lot.
Will?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank President Clinton for inviting me to the third university initiative. So I feel kind of like a veteran, but this is a great forum for me to talk about what I think is the most important thing to all of us is our food. And being a farmer and running organization in Milwaukee, Growing Power, the work that I do today has really evolved over the years. This is our 20th, we just finished our 20th year, so we're in our 21st year of doing urban agriculture in our local communities and now globally. But what I try to do in our organization is try to get the most unlikely folks at the table, because I think for us to really change our food system, a food system that badly needs changing, is we have to have everybody at the table. 15 years ago, it would only be crusty old farmers like myself and people studying the food system from universities, academics. But now we need everybody at the table to really change our food system, because we have to leverage the strengths of all those folks, from politicos to corporate folks to engineers, every medical folks, especially in terms of how we have to change the way that we even prescribe medicine, these integrative preventative medicine. That piece has to come into play, because it's really unsustainable for us today to keep sending more and more people to the hospital, more and more sick people, especially in communities of color. So the work that I do is a lot different than 20 years ago. It's not just putting a plant in the ground. It's really trying to quantify a lot of things about, for example, the nutritional value of the food that we eat. Because we'll eat today and we have no idea the food that we're eating, the nutritional value, and that's really where the rubber meets the road. So having everybody at the table is really, I call it the good food revolution table.
Okay, but ag is a good example, because in Nebraska, the Nebraska Farmers Union is working with the Humane Society USA on animal regulations. Who's your unlikeliest ally? Will?
Well, when it comes to animal, a lot of folks are against, of course, eating red meat and that sort of thing. But I support those farmers that are doing small, sustainable agriculture in terms of grass-fed meat and grass-fed animals on a local level, so that we can get back into the game of really hiring people in those communities, because we've lost so many farmers, over 1 million since 1960, and we have to really get those communities engaged again in local production. So that's kind of the position I'm at.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, the social psychologists who look at this say that you can get two groups together, and if the conditions aren't right, they can end up hating each other after the meeting more than when they were kept separate. What have you found are the necessary ingredients for a successful kind of collaboration?
I think the necessary ingredients, actually this is a really good question, because in any situation, when you want to enter a meeting and you know who your audience is, I think there's 3 factors to it. First, you need to, it's self, us, and then now. You need to first really connect with them on a very personal level. Then connect with your audience. Like, how am I connected with you? What are similar factors, ties that can connect me to you? And then the now, what is the situation at hand, and how can I make my situation better? So to really set the stage and actually connect with that audience, I think is huge. Coming out of it, even though you might come out of it not agreeing, I feel like if you have really dived in and really shown your own connection with that individual, I think that will come out, even with just mutual respect more than anything.
So personal.
Yes.
Senator, what works? The rare times things work. What is it what are the key ingredients?
Well, I think, small politics are a team sport. Big politics are about the passion of ideas and good public policy. So to stay with big politics, it needs to be issue-driven. I can give you a couple of examples. A very recent example. We have now 20 women in the United States Senate. As I said a few weeks after the election, and I was in the very small women's bathroom for women senators right off the floor, we're going to need a bigger bathroom. But the women have decided that we will work together on human trafficking. And it doesn't matter whether you're a very conservative woman from Nebraska who's a diehard Republican and probably would be proud to be called a Tea Party supporter, or whether you are Barbara Boxer or Dianne Feinstein from California. You care about human trafficking. And if we can get a bipartisan group around that issue, the other issue we're working on a bipartisan basis is sexual assault in the military and getting after that problem. Those are two good examples where we can kind of leave our party affiliation at the door. PEPFAR is another good example of the work that has been done around the world, and it was always bipartisan. What really happens in Washington is moderation is not cool. We have very few congressional districts that aren't bright red or bright blue, so everybody's worried about a primary. They're playing to the cheap seats. They don't want to compromise. And not enough gathering around the issue as opposed to gathering around election year politics.
Yeah, it seems like issues these days almost become, it's not what you say, it's who says it that determines how people react. So, I mean, it's almost a tribal response rather than a...
Yeah, like I'm afraid to say in some rooms of my supporters that I am working with Tom Coburn, or I'm working with, I co-sponsored a bill with Jim DeMint. Well, there's a lot of people in this room that are going, what? You know, she's a Democrat. What is she doing sponsoring a bill with Jim DeMint? It's moments like that it is that us-them moment where we can agree on something, and I think that President Clinton showed that with Pete Peterson in the day.
And sometimes with food, Will, I mean, that's one of these cross-cutting issues, but sometimes it's not. What's the difference? Why does sometimes it become a Republican Democratic issue, and other times you're able to make those connections?
Well, and we have this, a lot of people try to fix it so that big ag, which we know is pretty much controlling the food system in terms of number of farms, number of farmers, or not a lot of farmers, but mechanized production. For example, we were talking in the back about Mississippi, where I was there 2 weeks ago, how that whole landscape has changed from, say, 15, 20 years ago. Farms were 500 to, say, 1,500 acres. Now they're 8,000 to 30,000 acres. Less farmers. Most of the production is cash crop farming, soybeans, corn, that sort of thing, cotton. And those communities have been devastated. So what we try to do is to get folks together at the table. I think it's really important to demonstrate something concrete, because a lot of people don't believe that communities, that we can't go back to those days where communities grew their own food, where states grew their own food, and we weren't shipping food 1,500 miles or flying it from other countries. It's an unsustainable way, and all these food deserts that we have in communities, and it's just not in this country, it's around the world. So we need a combination of both. Is the industrial food system going to go away anytime soon? No. But what we need to do is to be able to give people a choice. If they want to buy local, which 86% of people last surveyed said they would rather buy locally grown food than food that's shipped far away, that may be 10 days old before it gets in their belly, versus food that's grown locally with a lot more nutritional value that we can get in our bellies in 1 or 2 days. So, but what we try to do is do something very concrete. We can sit at tables and talk about these issues forever. But unless we really do something concrete and really inspire people to go out and do something, and that's what I try to do in my work and our organization.
And Sarah, when you've tried some of these collaborations, tell us about something that screwed up, a failure.
Oy, okay, that's a loaded question. Things that failed in terms of,
you thought you could put something together with a group of people, and you know, it just didn't work?
I think, and this can apply, I think, to many startup organizations. I think when I started off connecting, reaching out to the people I knew. And those are called strong bonds. You know, people I knew, people with similar interests, similar skills, etc. That's how I built, you know, my team, and I was moving forward, and I realized that I was actually digging a hole instead of expanding and reaching out and actually building onto our ideas. So I think that really, you know, we face a couple of hurdles on the way in terms of, you know, running our programs, etc. But then I realized that you need to build a team based on, you know, what skill sets do I have, what skill sets do I lack, and how can I complement those skill sets? Let's build a team that actually bring in new ideas. And actually, my partner in this organization, Sarah Chang, is a perfect example. Like, I'm very idealistic. I think big. I'm like dreamy. I want to do X, Y, and Z. And she's like, okay, let's be practical here. Let's be realistic. Let's actually get things done. And then, you know, so building that, I think that's very important. Yeah.
Senator, you mentioned a couple of issues. I mean, the political scientists say things break down when there are cross-cutting issues. When normally these days, your friends are always your friends, your enemies are always your enemies, and that breaks down when there are issues that come up where people don't have set positions. Looking forward, can you see those areas where those strict divisions, blue-red divisions, break down because people don't have, you know, there's a chance to find a cross-cutting issue or cross-cutting relationships?
Well, part of it is, and this is where you all come in. I would love to throw a net over you and keep you all here in Missouri, because I know you're all going to be bright and shining stars in terms of leading this country. I think one of the biggest problems is the way we consume our political information and the way we apply our political information. When I was growing up, my mother and father used to make us watch the evening news. And we could either choose Walter Cronkite or Huntley and Brinkley. You're way too young to remember who those people are. But it was the evening news. It was very straightforward, very objective. Now people can go to a source for affirmation instead of information. You can go and hear news, quote unquote, and just be reassured that you're exactly right and that there's nothing that you think that is out of line. And the people who make the most noise in our political system are those people, are the people who are so strong in their beliefs on one issue that they don't want to hear anything else. So that's why I want you all to try to adopt a moderate as somebody you can support politically, because moderation is not an evil thing in politics. They are the people that drive the compromises. They're the people that sit at the table and say, no, you're not exactly right, Bernie Sanders, and no, you're not exactly right, Ted Cruz. Definitely not exactly right, those of you from Texas. And try to bring them together around issues like how we're going to deal with the debt or how we're going to keep healthcare costs down. And just listening to what you already believe in is not a way to move the ball. And I know that in the areas that you're working in, it's very easy to get surrounded and insulated with people that agree with you. Get outside that comfort zone. Go to someone who disagrees with you and try to recruit them to the cause that you hold so dear.
You know, one of the biggest divisions, Will, is between rural and urban America. I think the Democratic districts in Congress are 11 times more densely populated than Republican districts. And rural areas are, I mean, the country is zooming off in these different directions. Longevity rates for women in hundreds of rural counties is declining after years of people living longer lives. Regional accents are increasing. Suicide rates are... We don't seem to have the same connections between rural and urban places. What's going on there?
Well, I come from a rural background in agriculture and where I grew up, and now I'm doing both both urban and rural. As a matter of fact, my first organization was called Farm City Link, and my idea was to link rural America with urban America because they need each other. I mean, for example, much of the food is still grown in rural America, and they need the markets in urban America. And we have all of these food deserts that we talk about all the time, that almost nightly they talk about these food deserts where grocery stores have pulled out of areas where most of our population exists. For example, in Detroit, there's 169 square miles in Detroit. 90 square miles is vacant. There are no retail grocery stores left in the city of Detroit, and we have to fix that. You know, that is having impact on our health and our healthcare system. The more people that are getting sick, it's putting more pressure on all of us. And we all have a responsibility, and I believe the only way to do it is to mend some of those fences. And you're right, in rural, as I travel throughout the country, and a lot of our regional training centers are in Mississippi, Alabama, Kentucky, states like that, they're suffering as bad as inner city communities because, again, they lost their farming infrastructure to large ag. All of those folks, generations of folks were involved in agriculture. And when you go to those towns now, that small scale, those jobs have gone away, but there are people still living there with no possibilities of work. There's no industry in agriculture anymore for those small towns. So we have to work with those rural farmers that are suffering, that have a problem getting their products to market because they're not big enough. They're not big enough, so they have to band together, create these co-ops, but not co-ops of the past, co-ops so that they can aggregate their food and get it into markets and be competitive, because right now most of those farmers can't compete because they're not big enough. So that's part of the work we do, and this work really is around social justice. It's really about social justice, and part of the work that we do in our organization, we have a project called Growing Food and Justice, and we have over 1,000 people in organizations around the country to dismantle racism in the food system, because there is racism in the food system regardless of how we want to spin it or say it doesn't exist. It is, you know, and it's a social justice issue, it's an environmental justice issue, it's a food justice issue.
Okay, Sarah, maybe some of this is, we're talking about this left-right division, blue-red division. Maybe this is just the baby boomer problem. Is there a generational change in how people look at political division?
Regarding the U.S. or in general?
Both.
Both.
All.
Oh. I think that division is still there. I think humans will be humans. I think in terms of, at the Kennedy School, like in my classes, that division is very clear. And
where your classes are where?
At Harvard Kennedy School.
Okay.
So I'm taking this, I took a class, and you can see the clear divide between the Republicans and the Democrats. And you see a lot of students who are Democrats would take classes with professors who are Democrats, and vice versa. And if you're a Democrat, it's rare for you to take a class with a Republican professor. It's a clear divide within the classes. Internationally, I think that's also existing. I feel like we face a lot of problems in Lebanon with our work. Lebanon is so politicized. Your socioeconomic, political, religious identities are all politicized. So working and trying to do a program that brings everyone together, I think has been one of the hardest things that we've been trying to do. So I think it's existing.
You know, it's interesting. Education almost makes this problem worse. There's Diana Mutz at the University of Pennsylvania says that the people with the most diverse political backgrounds are those that have just graduated from high school. The people who have the most isolated political acquaintances are those that have suffered through graduate school. So, it seems like we use our education and our economic power to isolate ourselves and not to make the world bigger, but to shrink it to the size of our little community.
I could totally see that. And just to give credit to the Kennedy School. They are trying to push against that, you know, the kind of trend. So we have a core class, an ethics class that we have to take, and they really push us on our thoughts. They're like, are you really, you know, as a libertarian, do you really think that way? Or as a, you know...
Is that institutionalized, or is that just part of the class?
It's part of the core program of the public policy, so every single public policy student has to take it, which is great because, like, students are forced to see, are you really thinking that way? Why, and this is why someone else thinks that way. So it was a great experience for me because I came in thinking one way and I came out thinking another way, and I hope that was the purpose. I don't know.
You know, it's funny how those institutional changes might work. David Boren, former senator, president now, University of Oklahoma, he saw his students having lunches in all these different places. And he said, no, if you're going to eat on the University of Oklahoma campus, you're going to come to one place, and everyone's going to have to eat together and see one another.
He's obviously Republican. No, just kidding, just kidding. That was a joke, it was a joke.
Senator, what are those, are there sort of institutional ways or you know, how can we mix things up?
I just know this, if they made all of us eat in one room in Washington, it would be ugly. I get the institutional part, and one of the things that we're trying to do right now in the Senate is we are making, in the old days, senators didn't come home every weekend. Right. I fly back to St. Louis every weekend. Many of the senators never bring their families to Washington. In the old days, you couldn't get around like that, so everyone lived in Washington, so they socialized with each other. They went to dinner, they became friends, their spouses became friends. Well, now you got to work at that. That has to be a part of your job, and we are beginning to do a better job working at that, trying to go out to dinner with colleagues that we think we have nothing in common with. I can't speak to what's going on over in the House of Representatives because it's, I think, harder over there because, as I mentioned before...
Why would it be harder? Why would it be harder?
Well, it has to do with, this is what you guys can fix. Fix redistricting. Because redistricting, it is a problem that needs to be fixed, because what has happened is the sitting congressmen and women have redrawn their lines to be safe. And if you're safe, all you worry about is a primary. So if all you worry about is a primary, then if you're a Republican, you are always going to your far right, and if you're a Democrat, you're always going to your far left. And therefore, the middle there's atrophy. It's a complete eating away of the moderates in the House of Representatives because of redistricting. That is a real action item that I would love some of you that are interested in political science that you would take on for your generation, because until we get back to having swing districts in the House of Representatives, it won't make any difference if we have a united government in terms of both houses controlled by the same party. You're going to continue to have the kind of friction that you see as an everyday occurrence out there.
We have some questions coming in on the little Twitter feed here. The first one is, how have you seen technology and social media used to effectively incorporate unlikely allies? Sarah.
Oh, yeah. I think social media can really pull on the emotional string. I mean, like, if you create videos, or if you create some type of social media that really connects with the person I feel like it really connects with the person on the heart. If you want to work with academics and you're trying to kind of like work with academics, you need to have facts, and that's where social media can really spread that, you know, that conversation. But videos or messages or quotes that are very personal can really go really viral and can really connect with people that you would never have been able to connect with, especially funders, which is a great, which is necessary when you're working in nonprofit work.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely important. You know, I'm from the old school. Of course, word of mouth was the way we got our message out. But today, just recently, I hired a anchor person from a local television station. She'll be our PR person, and she'll get messages out every day about what we do, and that's a way of educating everybody, not only Republicans or Democrats or whatever, it's everybody, about what is going on, what's going on in aquaculture in terms of these fish farms that we're building around the country. A lot of people don't know a lot of stuff that's happening on every college campus. I've just visited 2 college campuses in the last week. They have student gardens. At every school, there's a garden in every school. There's this revolution that's going on, and that's the title of my book, The Good Food Revolution. It's really folks in this room that will take the work that we've done to the next level, because 70% of the folks that are involved in the food system work today are under 40 years of age. And this generation that's sitting in this room will be the generation that will be innovative and start using things like renewable energy in terms of the work that we do on farms to reduce the production costs so our food stays our good food, because our good food is our medicine. Our food is our medicine, and we have to understand that. But we need more technology in terms of being able to have renewable energy, to be able to produce renewable energy, because our renewable energy footprint on farms is very small right now. And the only way to reduce that, so getting the messages out is going to be very important in terms of the technology that I'm not very good at, but my daughter who's here and her generation, I mean, she's tweeting, and I have to say,
you can do this.
I have to.
I swear you can.
I have to tell her sometime, Senator, that hey, let's talk. Get off of that thing, let's talk sometimes, but it's all good. But we need that. Continue to do that. But this generation out here, and I challenge them, because as I go to college campuses and speak, this generation is the generation that wants to go back into their communities. I spoke at Yale last year and a couple of years before that, and students take me out, and I said, what are you guys going to do? You're graduating, what are you going to do? And they said, we want to do what you're doing. I said, well, what are your parents going to think? They spent all this money sending you to Yale, and you're going to want to go out and farm or work in the food system? And they said, well, that's what we want to do. So they don't want to maybe go to corporate America, all of them. They want to do something. They want to give back to their community, and that's good, because that's how we're going to make change.
Sarah, there's a question that came in from Brenna Alexander asking, how useful is collaboration with government in an environment where extreme polarization prevails? It's really for the senator, but I was going to ask Sarah first whether the generation that's in school now maybe looks at government and says that's not a good partner. It's just too much. It's not a productive partner because of the polarization that exists. Is there a backing away from looking at government as a stable and reliable and useful partner in affecting change?
I think no matter what the situation is, I think you ultimately need to work with the government. Yes, as a nonprofit, as grassroots work, you will make change and do change on the ground. But to really to make it sustainable, you need to take it to the government, because at the end of the day, the only way a government will develop and improve is through making the government accountable to its people's needs. And if you're avoiding that and you're just ignoring it, you're just gonna continue feeding into that division between the government being accountable to its people and people needing the services. So no matter what, ultimately you need to approach the government, especially if this is more surface-related stuff. The government needs to be involved. So even if it's polarized, find a way, find a neutral base in the government and try to work with them. And yeah, it's going to be a difficult process. I'm not saying it's easy. We're still figuring it out because Lebanon is crazy. But yeah, so I think you need to work with the government.
Senator, there's a real difference between local government is working. I mean, states and I'm from Austin, Texas. We do everything. Everyone agrees, so we're able to do whatever we want. Mississippi votes one way, and so it seems like the action has pulled away from Washington, is now popping up in states and cities where the big majorities and where people aren't working with unlikely allies. I mean, that's where the action is.
Well, I think part of it is all of us want, especially those of us that run for office, I mean, we have this genetic defect. We want to be publicly loved. And so you want reassurance constantly. I mean, my social media, the hardest thing about my social media is putting up with all the haters on my Twitter feed. I mean, you should read this stuff. It's bad, man. They are ugly and mean. But I think that for people who are advocating for an issue, that are interacting with their government, the tendency is to go to the part of government that agrees with you. I mean, it kills me when people come to Washington to see me from Missouri, and they are all the causes I care about. And meanwhile, my colleague probably needs a little work on some of those. And I always say to them, have you been to Senator Blunt's office? Well, no. You know, they want to come see me because they know I agree with them. And I think there's a tendency to do that. I think part of it is being uncomfortable enough to push your point, but listening carefully to the person you're dealing with, but pushing your point with people who you know disagree with you. And that's how you can finally bring people in to a place of consensus, is by doing that. So don't go to the friendly congressman or the friendly city councilman or the friendly mayor or the friendly school board member. Go to the member that is not as friendly and spend time with them.
But David wants to know here, when do you not compromise? When is compromise a harmful thing to, you're nodding, Sarah, so what do you think?
I think that you need to make sure that, yes, there is a level of compromise, but you need to make sure that your agenda or the thing that you're calling for, your cause, is not compromised to a point where you're not going to get anything done. This happens a lot. Where you're funding from, one instance, like for nonprofit organizations, funding is a huge aspect. And where your funding comes from really influences how your program works out. So if you're working with the government and the government has its own agenda and you really have a different agenda, you need to figure out a different way. You need to still work with the government, but you need to make sure that your cause is not lost. And that could easily be done. And that's, yeah, so.
Will, have you ever compromised when you felt like you shouldn't have later?
Well, you try to compromise. I mean, I can give you an instance where years ago, there were these groups forming to try to figure out the food system in Milwaukee, and we'd meet maybe once a month and for a whole year, and after a year, nothing was happening. You know, you're trying to get people to work together and nothing's happening. So I would go away, and I'd come back 2 years later to these meetings, and the same people were sitting there doing nothing. Okay. Meanwhile, they would say, "Will, where have you been?" You know, and I've been out building farms and doing all this work. So at some point, you may have to break away, because again, like I said earlier, you need to create these examples that you can educate folks, that you can bring politicos, because a lot of political folks, like our mayor, who's very much behind, and he was a congressman at the time, and actually I was up in I'm trying to think of Ohio, and it was Marcy Kaptur, Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur. I spoke at an event that she had, and she went back to Congress and told Congressman Barrett at the time, "Do you know about this guy Will Allen in Milwaukee?" And he didn't know who I was. And a couple days later, I got a call from his aide, and he wanted to come and visit. So you have to educate people, but you have to have something concrete to show them. But when it comes to compromise, I'm all about compromise and doing the right thing. But at some point, sometimes you have to forget about compromise, move on, get something done. To move if you have the passion to do what you're doing, you have to do that sometime.
We've got about 3 minutes left, 1 minute apiece. When these guys wake up tomorrow morning, what is it that they should remember? What is it that they need to remember to do to carry on this work? And we'll start with Senator McCaskill.
I think it's very dangerous to characterize people who disagree with you as the bad guys. I think you've got to find a common point of reference, and you may not be able to compromise. You may need to walk away because of your principles, and you'll know when you can't go that far. But if you listen with the same kind of passion for the other point of view as your own, then invariably you will find something you can work together on. And if you get a convert to your cause, they are many times more powerful than people who were with your cause all along. And I would just encourage you to do that. And I just want you to know that even if the former President of the United States, who I admire a great deal, was not associated with this organization, I would be so honored at any time to be in front of all of you. You reflect the very best of our country. And what you need from your country is for it to reflect your values. And I hope that you stay at it and dream those dreams as big as you possibly can. Find an enemy to work with and get it done. Thank you very, very much.
Will, we wake up tomorrow morning, what do we do?
Repeat that again?
When we wake up tomorrow morning, what do we need to remember to do? Yep.
Me?
You. Will. Mike.
Well, I want to say that. Oh, I'm sorry. I want to kind of speak to these young people because I hope that the three of us really inspire you all to wake up tomorrow morning and be inspired to go out and do something, whether it's following Senator McCaskill's, follow her and get into politics and public office on a local or regional or national, or whether you follow this young lady's work and aspire to be like her, what she's doing in her work, or if you're a farmer or whatever, but do something. You know, just don't talk about it. Don't just, you know, dream, but turn your dreams into reality. So when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'm going to continue to do it and speak out and do the work that I do, and do something concrete and positive. And I have a great hope for this generation because, like I said at the beginning, this is a generation that will take my work to the next level. So I feel that I have a responsibility of passing on everything that I possibly can before the end of my time to this next generation. And I know they will take it and make it better than anything I've ever done. So I have great hope, even though there's so much negative stuff we hear about on the news today. I have great hope that that we're gonna do things like reduce the carbon footprint. These young people will probably be the generation that comes up with a carbon tax that will make renewable energy possible in this country so we can save ourselves, that we can make sure that tonight 3 out of 10 young people will go to bed without a meal. That shouldn't happen in America. It shouldn't happen anywhere in the world. With all that we have, that shouldn't exist. So,
Sarah, what's your final tip?
My final tip. So I think that, stemming off of what Will was saying, that we're all here with a passion, with something that we're interested to do. And I would suggest that tomorrow morning when we wake up, and actually this is what I'm trying to do, really try to have one-on-one conversations with people, with strangers, with your friends, with your colleagues. Talk to them about what you're passionate about. Get their opinion on your work. Really try to see what their views on, because that will help you grow as a person. That will help your organization, your project grow, and that will really also spread the message. Like what I'm trying to do, like yesterday when I was coming back from the airport to the hotel, when I sat down in the car next to the driver, the shuttle driver, you know, I struck up a conversation. I try to always, any person that I meet, just talk to them. Get to know that person, because at the end of the day, we are humans. We all have, I would say we all have similar passions in terms of human rights, etc. And they might have something to add to your work, so.
And on that, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Senator. Thank all of you.